Well, at the moment, during the state of national disaster, under the law, as I understand it, the SANDF is still being deployed. Soldiers are being used by government, can be used by government during the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, I don't know about you, but it seems very few soldiers are actually on the streets at the moment. I've seen hardly any. At the same time, many countries on our continent have stopped concentrating on using their armies on peacekeeping missions in Africa to focus on the coronavirus. Dr. Marko Svicevic is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Johannesburg, specializes in these issues. Dr. Svicevic, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. Firstly, we haven't seen many soldiers on our streets for quite some time, even though I think they're still technically deployed. Are you surprised by this?
Well, no, not entirely. I think the SANDF deployment, part of it is to as an enforcer role. Now, that's the primary role that they've currently taken, but there's, I'm pretty sure, a lot behind the scenes, you know, beyond simply just enforcing lockdown regulations. And we see this across other deployments as well, you know, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana. We tend to only see the deployment on the streets, but we don't always put that much focus on the other aspects, which includes, for example, them assisting certain healthcare facilities and so on. So one can not only expect to see them on the streets at the moment.
I mean, our SANDF has health facilities, military hospital, doctors, ambulances, medics. I would imagine other militaries do as well. I mean, they can be very, very useful, if just from an organizational point of view, moving stuff around.
Yes, I think there has been some sentiment shared that the deployment is part of a war on an invisible enemy. But I think the SANDF deployment, much like other deployments, primarily deals with more practically resource mobilization. We see this again in several other countries. The practical point is that the SANDF has certain capabilities which are unparalleled compared to some of the civilian entities, and therefore the primary purpose for such a deployment would, practically be speaking, the capability and capacity for mobilization, communication, and assistance of private and public healthcare systems in the country.
We as South Africa don't face many external threats at the moment, but I'd imagine there are places on our continent who do. So I'm thinking of the Sahel region, I'm thinking of organizations like Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. They kill, they sometimes kidnap civilians and citizens of other countries. Those countries' militaries, are they being used in the way that the SANDF is being used? Does that mean there's a risk that actually countries aren't focusing on these insurgencies that could be very, very dangerous in the future?
Yes, you know, part of the problem with the fight against the coronavirus at the moment is that several states as well as organizations have dedicated a tremendous amount of resources to fighting the pandemic, potentially also diverting resources we normally use to fight insurgencies, non-state actors, terrorist organizations. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has recently highlighted that this is one potential threat which can evolve because, you know, insurgencies, as widespread as they are currently being put in second place because of all the resources dedicated to fighting the pandemic.
I mean, in this situation, could we find that the security situation in some parts of Africa has changed as a result of the pandemic in the longer term?
Yes, there are some studies which are coming out at the moment suggesting that, you know, in specific conflict regions, conflict generally still remains stable. But in some areas, for example, the recent Mozambique headlines with Cabo Delgado, the suggestion is that the conflict in that area has tripled. So certainly some organizations, some terrorist organizations would take advantage of the situation. In the Middle East, for example, we see the Houthi movement in Yemen, which has issued a call to its supporters suggesting that they should rather come out and fight than fall victim to the virus. So certainly the pandemic will, in the long run, also change the conflict situations on the continent and globally as well.
Dr. Marko Svicevic, I do appreciate the time. Thank you, a postdoctoral fellow at Wits University.